And I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. We welcome Geir Pedersen and Joyce Masuya to the meeting today, and we're grateful to them for their reports. We also listened to the comments of Nirvana Shorky. On the political track, we would note the holding of the 7th meeting of the Drafting Commission of the Constitutional Committee between the 21st and 25th of March in Geneva. It's important that Syrians have the opportunity to engage in direct dialogue and discussions of the future foundations of their own state. We see no alternative to continuing the political process that is led and owned by Syrians themselves, with the assistance of the UN in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. We believe it important also for the Special Envoy to stick to what is directly contained in his mandate as set forth in Security Council Resolution 2254 and more actively cooperate particularly with the Syrian sides. I'm saying this because we have more and more questions that arise around the attempts of the Special Envoy to promote his step-based initiative, with a specific scope, the participants, and also the added value of which is still unclear. Since Damascus and the oppositions are refusing this idea, I won't hide the fact that we are starting to worry more and more that this scenario could have a very negative impact on the outcomes of the Special Envoy's efforts to accompany the work as part of the Constitutional Committee, including in the context of preparing for its next meeting. President, despite the fact that large-scale warfare has not taken place in Syria since March 2020, the situation on the ground remains volatile. There is still permanent tension around the Idlib's de-escalation zone, where fighters from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham have turned into a terrorist enclave, where they essentially hold Syrian civilians hostage. At the same time, we'd note attempts to exonerate terrorists through involving them in pseudo-authorities created in Idlib. This doesn't fool anyone. This can't fool anyone. Dividing terrorists into good ones and bad ones is unacceptable. Regular clashes are happening around the perimeter of 3 other zones of Turkish operations in the north of Syria. The situation around the Sinai prison in Haseka at the start of the year was in turn a clear confirmation of the significant that terrorists are gaining strength east of the Euphrates, with a de facto inaction of the US and their allies, and ISIL has reared its head again. Another source of threat is the Washington-occupied safety zone in At-Tanf. Fighters trained and prepared by American instructors are carrying out incursions against Syrian forces and detaining refugees in Rukban, blocking delivery of humanitarian assistance to the camp. One of the serious destabilizing factors, the arbitrary missile strikes of by Israel in violation of the airspace of Syria and also Lebanon, Jordan and Iraq. Over the last year, according to various data sources, around 40 such attacks have taken place. And Syrian armed forces and civilians have fallen victim of this, including women and children. In light of the suffocating unilateral sanctions and politicized approaches by Western countries to providing humanitarian assistance to Syrians, the socio-economic situation is continuing to worsen. Food prices have reached new heights, the Syrian pound is collapsing, and the number of those in need of emergency assistance has reached a record 14.6 million people. We see that unlawful sanction policy of Western states carried out as regards people of a host of different countries, including Syria, whose politics that Washington and satellites doesn't like, have long become an inhumane war against civilians. Rather than with guns and shells, they use methods of economic coercion. We'd note that the humanitarian plans of the UN for Syria for 2022 sets forth a significant share, around a quarter, 25% of projects for early recovery projects for medical and educational facilities and also water supply. However, as practice has shown, these plans remain substantially underfunded, and the implementation of projects for development and reconstruction are hampered by political preconditions on the part of donors. Largely for these reasons, still more than half of Syrians live in regions that need demining, and a third of households only have 2 hours of electricity supply a day. It is notable that this unacceptable situation is happening 9 months after the unanimous adoption of Security Council Resolution 2585, which should establish regular domestic access across Syria and boost early recovery. Particular attention should be paid to the fact that over this time, only 3 cross-line convoys have reached Idlib, and the 0 provisions from Damascus to the north of the country. In terms of justification for this, we hear over and over again a lack of necessary agreement from those aforementioned Hayat al-Sham terrorists and indications that there's unsafe working conditions for humanitarian workers. We see this all as a fundamental reluctance to address the problem of humanitarian deliveries from Damascus, including to Idlib. We'll make no secret of the fact that in these conditions, the arguments for further extending the cross-border resolution have practically run out. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement.